All right, good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully, Peter got you guys all woke up after lunch, so it's not just me, although I do have to say, coming out from behind a curtain like that, I feel a little bit like I'm the comedian on the Carson show. Does anybody remember that? Like you come out from behind and they come running out. Sorry, I'm not that funny, but I'll do my best to entertain. So as Marnie said, so I've been at Demandbase now for about 5 years. And it's been a wild ride, as the ABM roller coaster goes, right? When I started at Demandbase, it was like account-based marketing. People are like, okay, those words make sense, but what does it really mean? And over the course of the last 5 years, there's been a lot of different definitions of account-based marketing thrown out there. And so, what I ended up doing, because I ran field marketing at Demandbase, I was like, well, we need to educate people on account-based marketing for them to actually use our products. And so that's where kind of building all of this content around the how of ABM, right? A lot of folks were focusing on the why or the what is it, and we started to go down the road of the how, because that's really where people needed to get. And so anyways, so I had built a bunch of content, and I thought I had the well, how do you get started with ABM? Content, and more and more I had different people coming to me and going like, really just break it down a little bit more simply. And so what you're going to see today is a little bit of kind of like, what are some of the key milestones, some of the things that people might overlook or forget about, that you really want to make sure that you do kind of put a finer point on when rolling out your ABM strategy. But also, I'm trying to make it less scary, because there's a lot of companies out there that are stuck in this analysis paralysis around ABM and should I, and I don't know if we can, and stuff like that. So to really try and take kind of the fear out of it and say, you know what, just get started, and it'll get better over time. So with that, I'll dive in. So this one is one of my favorite slides that actually I have to give full credit to Erica over at CA Technologies. She put this up when we actually asked her to speak at our conference 2 years ago. And I don't know about you, but I love a good margarita, but I don't like it defining my job and my career, right? So I used to have the old serious decisions model up here. This is a little bit more fun. But really what this is to say is that, in the old model, the traditional demand gen model, right? We focused up at the top of the champagne glass, of the margarita glass, we put as much as we could in the top in the hopes that enough would flow through to close one business at the bottom. Right? And, that's somewhere between 0.3 and 1% of everything we do would flow through to close one business. I don't know, I find that kind of depressing. And that's probably why, kids don't graduate from college going, I want to be a B2B marketer, right? I mean, how many people learned about B2B marketing when they went to college? Anybody? Okay, a few. It was all B2C. Right? And so suddenly you get into the B2B world and you're like, well, what do I do with this? Right? This is a product of B2C marketing, right? It's a numbers game in B2C. Now it's turning around. But really where we want to get here is to that champagne glass. It's never going to be a one-to-one relationship. Everything you put in the top of that champagne glass is going to flow through to close one business. We're never going to get there. But a lot more is going to, because we're going to be a lot smarter about what we do. We're going to build those relationships with those customers. And we're going to look at signals that say, hey, actually, this account is ready for us. So let's work together with our sales counterparts and make them turn into revenue for us. These slides are, the colors got goofy, but I think we can still roll with it. And some of the formatting, sorry about that. But anyways, so the other thing is, at high level, margarita glass to champagne glass, at a numbers level, you take a look at this and you say, okay, you can actually improve all of your conversion metrics, right? And that's whatever that means for you. So per the earlier conversation, what is an MQL? It's different at every company. But understanding that your MQL to SAL is going to increase by 17%, by 51%, by whatever percentage matters to your organization is the important part here. And what it does tell you is that, okay, yes, while we as marketers are putting better quality stuff in the top of the funnel or, right at the beginning of the sales cycle here, the promise of account-based marketing is that then we actually follow that all the way through. It's not just a demand gen strategy, but it's rather a revenue marketing strategy. So we're following those leads all the way through to close one business, partnering with our sales counterparts to make sure that business actually closes. And the ultimate goal is to increase your close rates, your average deal size, and your overall funnel velocity, right? All sounds great. So why is everybody not doing it, right? So any brave souls out there want to say why they might not be doing ABM yet, or what was holding them up from doing account-based marketing at their organization?
Change is hard.
Change is very hard. There's the corporate culture issues. There's, yeah, definitely. Anyone else?
Some marketers might actually not want to work with sales that much. It's like, you know you should, but you never have to.
Yeah, but they're different. They're different over there. We don't really want to talk to them. Anyone else? Okay. So you nailed it on the head, right? Alignment, having to talk to that sales rep, or that sales team, and then orchestration and process, right? You have to get the entire organization aligned around an ABM strategy, and you have to have that orchestration built in, and changing an organization is hard. If you're an organization the size of Demandbase when I got there, which was only 50 people, it was easy to turn on a dime and move from kind of your traditional demand gen to an ABM strategy. But if you're a company of 85,000 people, that's going to be a whole lot harder, right? So that's kind of the biggest sticking point for people. And what you end up having is a lot of this going on, right? The sales rep is pointing at marketing, saying they're not doing their job for me. Marketing's pointing at sales, saying they're not following up on my leads. And marketing operations is stuck in the middle going, here's a report, right? And like hoping for the best. So this is why a lot of people aren't doing account-based marketing. And so how do you get past this, right? So I've got 10 quick steps that I'm going to ramble through here on kind of how you get past these sticking points in your organization. So first and foremost, break it down to its simplest point. It's all about accounts and revenue, right? It's not rocket science. It's nothing revolutionary. I may have been quoted saying that in 5 years, nobody's really going to be talking about account-based marketing. It's just going to be the way B2B marketing is done. Right? It's just a finer point on B2B marketing. It's smarter, it's more efficient, it's more effective. It allows you to build relationships instead of just selling stuff, right? That's where it comes from. And so, but to get everybody over that initial hurdle, it's all about your target account list and driving to revenue. If everybody's aligned around those two things, it becomes a lot more simple. Everybody in marketing is going to make different decisions, right? If you now, because how many people, I think this conversation happened during one of the other presentations this morning, but like how many people go, yay, we got 500 downloads of that ebook, right? And that's a success. Who stops there, right? That's okay if you don't want to raise your hand on that one. There are still lots and lots of organizations that I talk to out there that do. If you now say, instead of that being your metric being the percentage of those downloads that come from your target account list, now that's a very different conversation, right? So now it's not just about the pure numbers, it's about the quality of those numbers. Instead of getting 500 downloads of just any old person downloading your white paper, how many people have had their mother download their white paper, right? Gonna throw off those numbers a little bit. Your mom's probably not on your target account list, sorry to say. But now if you say, well, actually, our baseline before we started doing account-based marketing was about 25% of our downloads would come from our target account list. Our goal for this quarter is to get to 30 or 35 or 50%, right? You're going to think differently about your programs. You're going to think differently about who you're going to target with your programs to make sure that you increase that number and that percentage from your target account list. The second thing you're going to think about when you need to get to revenue is it doesn't stop at the MQL. You don't just hand over that lead to your sales rep and say, good luck, right? You want to make sure you're giving them as much information and as good of a chance as possible to close that business. So it's going to change things like your events team, right? So we like to say, and I apologize for any event planners in the room, we like to say, but it's account-based marketing is death to the corporate wedding planner, right? How many people have had, your event person puts up this shiny booth at the trade show and rolls up the margarita cart at happy hour, and all in an effort to get as many booth scans as they can, right? We've all been there, we've all done it, right? In an ABM world, instead of that being their tactic, they're still going to put up the trade show booth, but instead of rolling up the margarita cart, what they're going to do is they're going to get a separate suite. And they're going to look at the target account list of accounts that are actually attending that show and work with the SDR team to set up meetings in that suite with their sales reps, right? And then they're going to host a VIP dinner with everybody on your target account list after the first night of the show. just a different mentality. So it's not like you have to scrap everything you know about B2B marketing. It's not like you have to have a completely new marketing mix. You just have to look at everything through these two lenses. Next is know who's on your team, right? So obviously everybody talks about sales and marketing, super important. But if operations isn't along for the ride, this is going to be really hard. Everybody's shown their version of a dashboard or a report card that they share back and forth. Operations is the linchpin that's going to make that information happen. It's going to make sure that everybody, all the systems are talking to each other to make sure your marketing automation solution is talking to your CRM, is talking to any other platforms you have, so you can actually get that data and track it along the way. Customer success becomes really important because, like I said, it's not just a demand gen strategy, it's a complete revenue marketing strategy. So once somebody becomes a customer doesn't mean that you stop marketing to them, right? Or hand them over to a customer marketing manager who asks them for a case study, right? You need to continue to market to those customers to make sure that first and foremost they retain as customers, but secondly that you can upsell to them. Because you certainly wouldn't leave your sales reps to their own devices to sell net new accounts. So why would you do that to your account reps responsible for existing customer upsells? We should be supporting them there too. And then last but not least is getting your finance team on board. And in general, they love ABM because $1 in to the marketing team comes out at a much more predictable rate with account-based marketing. So they typically love it when we make this switch. So next, make sure everybody's goals are in alignment. And how do you do that? You know, there's obviously everybody knows there's corporate goals, sales goals, marketing goals. And, you know, the mistake that a lot of us marketers make is that typically the sales goal is just a revenue number, right? They have to hit $100 million in sales this year, right? Wrong. There's a lot more built into the sales number than you think. How many people know how their sales team is comped?
As of 5 minutes ago?
Okay. So about half the room. But that's really important. That, as a marketer, is gold. Understanding how they're comped, not understanding how much money they have the potential to make because that makes us depressed, but understanding that it's not just a revenue number, right? They don't just have a quota and any which way or shape they get there, have at it. Usually not. Some companies maybe. But usually what it's going to be is, okay, we've got, you know, kind of net new logos for product A. Net new logos for product B. Upsell to existing customers of a new product release, or you know, a percentage of their quotas needs to come from a new industry segment that we're going after, right? So understanding all of that, and if you don't understand that, how can you build the right marketing mix to help them satisfy their goals, right? So if you don't know today, go back to your office. So this is getting back to the earlier thing. Write it down, walk into your CRO's office and say, hey, I don't need to know how much money your sales reps make, but I need to understand the composition of their comp plan. It'll change the way you start thinking about the marketing programs and the marketing mix you put together. So the other thing that's going to happen is you're going to run into roadblocks when you're trying to roll out an ABM strategy. Marketing's not going to be equipped, like I said earlier. Most of us didn't learn B2B marketing in college. So we have that B2B mindset. So it's how do we improve that skill set to A, get people to work with sales and understand that they're not scary, but B, you know, there are going to be non-believers out there, either people who have been burned by ABM in the past, and typically that's people who weren't actually doing ABM. As Sangram mentioned earlier, it's not about a single tactic. It's a strategy. So they got burned by a particular tactic, perhaps, but not by the entire strategy. The corporate culture, right? Change is hard. That's not the way we've ever done things here before, right? You're going to hear those sorts of things, and that's definitely can be challenging. The focus on lead volume. If I hear one more time, yeah, but I just have to bring in a volume of leads, I'm like, that's just maddening to me. Like, but think about, you know, the quality versus quantity and not wasting your sales reps' time. And they're like, yeah, I know, but that's just what our CEO wants to see. I'm like, it's very depressing to me. And then the last thing is the bad blood that can exist between sales and marketing. So at our conference this year, we actually did something really fun. We had a confessions booth, which allowed marketers to go into this little booth and talk about some of the maybe the faux pas they made along the way as marketers, right? And so how many people here feel like they may have done something to contribute to sales' distrust of marketing at some point? Come on. I'll tell my story. So I did this. I like to put the caveat on it as I was only 3 years out of college when I did this. I'm much wiser now. But I was at my first startup in 2000 in Silicon Valley. Yes, I'm that old. And I was so smart. I was like, in charge of this. We were doing this new product launch, and email was kind of new, and I was all excited. And we had a website landing page, and we had our SDR team, and I was going to do this big email campaign and tell everybody in our database about our new product solution. And I was all excited, and I had it all teed up. I hit go on the campaign and went out to everybody, and it took about 5 minutes for me to get angry phone calls from my sales team going, "What did you just do?" I had a proposal in front of this prospect, and now they've put it on hold because they want to look at this new product we just launched. Oops. That was bad on me, right? I hadn't talked to the sales team. I just went ahead with that, thought I was doing the best thing possible, and I didn't lose my job, but I learned a lesson, a very important lesson with that. So next, understanding and being clear on the KPIs and metrics and having transparency around those metrics. So we talked a little bit about kind of the long-term goals, increased close rates, ACV funnel velocity, all those efficiency metrics when it comes to the entire organization. But more short-term understanding, what does the pipeline and pipeline health look like? Conversions are kind of one of those leading indicator types of things, and conversions of your target account list, right? Cost per opportunity is important because in an ABM world, and this is why finance likes it, in general, as your pipeline goes up, your cost per opportunity goes down because you're a lot more efficient on where you spend your money. Target account list engagement. This is a metric and kind of a new metric that's come about, but what percentage of your target account list are you engaging quarter over quarter, right? Where are you today? Where do you want to be by the end of Q3, end of Q4, and then on into 2019? And then account penetration. This is another really important metric that a lot of people skip over, is how many different contacts inside of your target accounts are you getting to, right? Because if you've only got one person that you're engaging inside of an account, interesting, but as we know, there's 6, 8, 10, 12 other stakeholders in that buying committee. So the more of them that you can get to and engage with your marketing programs, the more air cover you're providing to your sales team. So next is the all-important target account list, right? This is a question I get time and time again, is how big should your target account list be, right? So we built this little calculator, and this one's pretty complicated, but to help you just understand, like, if you understand these 3 things, it'll get you to the number of closed-won opportunities per rep. If you understand what your close rate is, that backs you into how many opportunities you should have. And then if you understand what percentage of your target account list converts to pipeline in a year, now this tells you how many target accounts each one of your reps needs to hit their quota at the end of the year, right? Really simple and something that you're taking straight from sales' numbers, understanding what your reps' quotas are and all those sorts of things. Others of these numbers are going to be historical numbers. So it really helps you come to a concrete number of like, this is how big our target account list should be. Now, what might happen is you look at that number and go, okay, my marketing team's 5 people and we have a budget of $100,000. We can't service 3,300 accounts, but that's now a good area of conversation. And then that's also where you can go to your finance team and say, hey, we just need more budget. We need more headcount, and here's why. So once you've identified how big that list should be, then you need to go set about fulfilling those 3,352 accounts, right? And we talked about a little bit, and on my next slide I talk about this, but once again, one of those hangovers from business school, the total addressable market is an irrelevant number. I kind of wish all B2B marketers would stop talking about the total addressable market, because here's the thing, just because somebody can buy from you doesn't mean you want to sell to them, especially if you're in a SaaS-based world. As we know, for most SaaS companies, if somebody churns from you inside of the first year, you will lose money on that account, right? Between the amount you spent to acquire them, the customer success rep that cared for them for that first year, and everything else, you will lose money on that account. So you want to make sure to eliminate as many of those as you can through understanding fit and then intent, right? And this is something that has largely been kind of manual, but we haven't been good at documenting, right? And this is where that conversation with your sales team becomes really important. Because I don't care what predictive analytics, AI-based, whatever tool you have, it is never going to know that your sales rep had a conversation last week with their prospect that said, sorry, we just signed a 3-year contract with your competitor. That takes them off the table for at least 2.5 years, right? You can do broad-based messaging, but you don't want to spend a ton of money targeting that account because they're not going to buy from you until they're about 6 months, or even consider you until they're about 6 months out from their contract renewal. So then we get to kind of thinking about your target audience. Got the total addressable market. I tend to put a little X over that because you really shouldn't be spending much, if any, money on your total addressable market. Typically, that's just going to come as a halo effect of doing good marketing. You know, you go to a trade show, you're not going to shutter up your booth when somebody comes by that's not on your target account list, right? They're still going to see your CMO speak at that conference, you know, and those sorts of things. But you don't really want to intentionally spend any money on your total addressable market. Then there's your target market, right? All the people who can buy from you and that you want to sell to, right? But typically that number is going to still be way too large. And there's also going to be people or accounts caught up in there that aren't ready to buy from you yet, right? So once again, spending your money there is probably not your best use of money and time. So then you get to your target account list, right? This is where the rubber starts to meet the road. This is where you start to target and think about your marketing programs going after these accounts. Then maybe you get to the AE top accounts. I believe you talked about them self-selecting like tier 1 accounts, right? We have what we call the AE top 30, that our reps select kind of the top 30 accounts that would make their year if they sold into them. And we kind of double down on our efforts there. And then we double down again when they get to the opportunity stage. And then once again, when they get to the customer. All along here, and unfortunately these were highlighted orange and they're not now, but you can see as you get closer and closer to the center circle is where direct mail becomes a lot more important, right? Because the closer and closer you get to that revenue number, the more resources you should be allocating. So, and direct mail has a lot of great, as you all know, a lot of great uses when it comes to your target accounts, but grabbing attention, right? Sometimes you're going to send out, and this is where alcohol seems to work really well. You find, you know, maybe it's your AE top account list, you know, the top 10 or the top 20 accounts for your sales reps. You send them all a bottle of champagne, right? We've done that before. It grabs their attention, you know, or, you know, this is more of a one-to-one kind of thing, but I spoke at a conference like this, and a gentleman came up to me afterwards and wanted to ask me a few questions, and I looked down at his shoes, and they were Allbirds. How many people are familiar with Allbirds? They're a Bay Area thing. And I said to him, I'm like, oh my God, those are great. I have never seen a pair of Allbirds in the wild. I'm like, they're always in San Francisco, and I was in Denver. And he was like, oh, I know, aren't they great, blah, blah, blah. He's like, I just got an email today. I'm like, I know, all the new colors, right? And so we had this totally random conversation. He's like, I want to get a pair of red ones that match our corporate color. So I take that, I go back to my sales rep, and I'm like, you get online right now, and you order a pair of those red Allbirds, and you send them to him. And that sales rep did that. 2 days later, he gets a text from the guy standing in his mirror with his Allbirds on. And let's just say he got that meeting. That is obviously not scalable, but that grabs people's attention, right? As well as creating a personal connection is really important. A little creepy to try and do that with an account you've never talked to before. But for a sales rep who's had a conversation, we had a sales rep who said, hey, so I just was in talking to this account, and they told me to like kind of, you know, cool it for the next 8 weeks because they're going into trade show mode and they just don't have any time to talk about buying our solution. And they said, let's send them something, right? So we can at least stay in front of them. So we assembled little trade show survival kits. She also knew they were big Scotch fans. So we put little bottles of Scotch in with, you know, the standard Band-Aids and those sorts of things, and sent those out to that entire team. So even though, as the sales rep, it's a little frustrating that you can't talk to them, she stayed top of mind, right? So lots of good uses for direct mail, and it becomes so much easier to figure out when and where to use it when you're focused on a target account list and you're focused on getting to revenue. So next is aligning your marketing team. How many people have ever fought over your database when it comes to sending out emails? Anyone? Yeah, I've been in more painful meetings than I care to admit about that. But it's really important to make sure that you think about not only your target account list and what are you going to send to them, but sub-segmenting or micro-segmenting your target account list, and then getting to the contact level inside of those accounts within your target account list, right? And making sure you're hitting all of those contacts and those accounts where they are with you as an organization. And so, what we were trying to figure out, and this is just a simplistic view of what we did at Demandbase, but we were trying to figure out, direct mail versus field events versus webinar versus an ebook, right? Who gets what kind of message? And we said, well, anybody who is in a field territory, right, field events kind of take priority for, but only for those accounts or those contacts that are already engaged with us. If somebody has never, ever engaged with us before, they're not likely to come to a field marketing event. So, hey, ebook and webinar mailing, you guys should still focus on those individuals within that account. We'll take the engaged individuals. So it's really important to kind of map this all out. It's somewhat laborious, but it's better to do this at the beginning of a quarter or the beginning of a year instead of having this conversation on a weekly basis every time there's new campaigns that need to go out. So this was a build slide. It's not working. But anyways, so we've talked a little bit about the sales and marketing misalignment. From the marketing perspective, we used to just generate our leads, throw them over the fence to sales and say good luck. Now, we are partners kind of all the way throughout. And I can't remember which presentation this morning talked about it, but it's important before you ever execute on a marketing campaign to vet it with your sales team. This is totally new, revolutionary, things we are not used to doing. Marketing is always known best, right? But vetting it with your sales team and even getting ideas from your sales team is really important because it does a couple of things. One, they've already road tested most of the messaging, right? Whether you know it or not, they've already been having these conversations. They know what works and what doesn't. Secondly, if they're consulted, if they contribute, they're far more committed to that campaign and its success, right? They're going to follow up on those leads when you bring them to them. You don't have to set SLAs for them on how quickly they need to follow up. They're going to follow up, right? Plus, they also know who you're targeting. You're targeting their target accounts. So it all works much better in the end of the day. What I liked that Heidi said was instead of collaborate and enable, I like to activate your sales team. It kind of puts it all into one. Behind these two images here, I had just kind of a couple of different ways to enable your sales team. But it's kind of a forgotten art for most marketers. Most marketing teams think of product marketing as the sales enablement function, right? They're the ones that create the corporate slide deck, the product slides, those sorts of things. But every marketer should be sales enablement focused. Because I like to liken it to the old adage of if a tree falls in the woods and nobody's there to see it, did it make a noise, right? If a marketer puts out a beautiful campaign and brings in all these leads, but there's nobody there to follow up on them, does it matter, right? So making sure your sales team knows what the campaign is, who the focus is, what the follow-up CTA is, and that you're aligned and you're coordinated, you're orchestrated in your activity around that campaign is really, really important. And then last but not least is ease your way into an ABM strategy. I would not ever suggest anybody flip the switch and go all in on ABM from day one. The first one is look at everything with that new lens. Don't make any changes to your marketing organization. Don't make substantive changes to your budget allocation. Don't suddenly invest in a ton of technology. First, look at all of your programs from an accounts and a revenue perspective and see what meets the sniff test and what doesn't, right? And figure out what your metrics and your reporting should look like. Set those baselines for what ABM's, is hopefully going to improve upon. Next, then optimize. Now, once you've figured out what works, what doesn't, here's now where you start to make some shifts in your marketing mix, in your budget, where you're going to start to evaluate your tech stack. What do you have? What do you need? What are the gaps? Those sorts of things. Hone in on best practices within your organization because you want to kind of have a best practices Bible before you really scale it across the organization. And then last but not least, you might start to think about reorging your team. So that's kind of when we get into the go all in strategy. reorging your team, I have had countless conversations with folks about how to think about your marketing team versus having demand gen and then customer marketing and partner marketing. We think about it as there should be a revenue ops team and there should be an ABM strategy and campaigns team, right? And within that, there's even new functions, like there's a customer revenue marketer, right? A lot of organizations, their customer marketers all about getting customer references. You should always have somebody, that to me is table stakes. You can hire a contractor to do that. Your customer marketer should be a customer revenue marketer. They should have their own demand gen funnel. They should be thinking about it like a demand gen marketer does as far as and their target account list is your existing customers. And then last but not least, and I won't get into this because I have hours with our friends over at the ITSMA on this, but tiering your approach to account-based marketing. So it's not just one strategy, but there's a one-to-one, a one-to-few, and a one-to-many. Heidi touched on this yesterday. One-to-one is, hey, those top 5, top 10 accounts that are going to bring in 70% of your revenue next year, allocating one marketer to each one of those, possibly. The one-to-few is kind of the segment marketing, and then the one-to-many is the broader revenue marketing strategy. So last but not least here, key takeaways, keep it simple, right? Start at the basics, start with your target account list, start with revenue. Make sure everybody's in alignment around, and make sure expectations are set up front. And then last but not least, work your way into it. Ease your way into it, learn the best practices, learn what works at your organization, and then slowly but surely expand over time. And you will see those eventual benefits of the increased ACV, close rates, and funnel velocity. So that's it. So feel free to connect with me, LinkedIn, Twitter, email. Everybody puts up their headshot up here, so I thought I would put all the fun things I could do here in Montana, except for I'm not staying over the weekend. But anyway, come find me. I'll be here all night as well. And thank you so much for your time.
Awesome. Thank you, Jessica. And I apologize for the PowerPoint is like the bane of our